First thing I want to know is I'm sure that you've probably looked over the tape of him going back probably even to high school. What do you think of him as an NFL prospect?
I mean, I listen, he's got everything you want, right? He's got all the tools that you need to be successful. So for me, I don't really think that that's the question anymore. I think anyone who's seen the film has seen, like, listen, this kid can make all the throws. His escapability is awesome. You've seen it to where, hey, things have broken down. He's gotten out of the pocket. The biggest thing is, like, how can they get this on track? And the thing that stinks right now for Chicago is, like, listen, week one was just really good to see your team go out and try to find a way to win in terrible conditions, right? So it's not like week one was one of those films where you look at and you go, oh man, it's really good to grade the guys today. Like you almost bury that tape, right? Because the conditions are so bad that there's not a ton you can learn from. And in this game, unfortunately, things just kind of slipped away. And then all of a sudden, you're down 24-7, you're on the road in a tough environment, and now you're trying to fight against everything that the Packers have built, which is a team to, hey, we're going to try to get ahead, and then we're going to kick back into two high safeties and get after your passer. So I think there are two kind of games that stink from an evaluation perspective for those coaches, but at the same time, there's definitely correctable stuff that we'll dive into.
We talked with Patrick Manley, as we do every week, the longest tenured Bear and former long snapper, breaks down film really, really well. And he said he saw multiple throws on which Justin Fields had a guy open in his progression and just didn't pull the trigger on the throw. And we've seen the Equanimeous St. Brown play where he broke off a slant route and decided to make it a go route because of how badly he beat his defender. And even Matt Eberflus said, well, he just didn't see him. Whether it's seeing the guy in time or seeing him and knowing, yes, green, throw it. How do you teach it? How do you coach in someone the automatic sense of throw or don't throw, don't think?
Yeah, well, first it's all relative, right? And this is what is a gift and a curse of everyone having the all-22, is that there's a lot of plays on film that quarterbacks, when we're in there, it's like, listen, dude, I'd have loved to throw that backside go, right, where he breaks the slant off. But there's no shot in heck that any quarterback, Peyton Manning included, would have had his eyes there, right? Based on the coverage shell, based on the route combination, we're supposed to have our eyes in certain spots. So there's certain things that are good and bad with the tape. Here's what I'll say in specific to Fields and trying to train that, hey, we got to give the dude a little bit of time with these concepts. So there's one that he missed on the concepts. Really, it's like fluty, but it's with double post. So the two outside guys, it's 3-by-1. The two outside guys both have post. The furthest guy in, right, our number 3 receiver is on a sail route. He just hasn't repped that concept. It's not like Ohio State had that. Nagy didn't have it last year. So this is the first time he's seen it. The sail breaks open. He's got a speed read through the first and second post, and he just hangs on that second post, right? That's why he doesn't get his eyes on the sail and rip it. Then there's some other stuff where it's like, from a play calling perspective, I think we could help this kid. So, Chicago, I thought the first drive looked great, right? They were running the ball effectively. Well, why were they? Because the Pack were in too high, right? Anytime the Packers were in too high, they could gash them in the run game. And then all of a sudden you'd see them kind of, hey, get to single high rotation. And I thought we had some pretty terrible single high route concepts drawn up for him. So for me, it's like, from a play calling perspective, we can really help him with his eyes and kind of force him to get to certain spots, especially when we get that single high coverage. That I think once the Pack went single high, it was really hard for Chicago to move the ball for a while there. And then all of a sudden we started running the ball better. Again, it's just because they rotated back into two shell. So to me, I think there are certain things that are going to jump out on film where you're like, oh, wow, that guy's wide open. But it kind of is a nuanced perspective, because he might be wide open, but there's also, 3 different reasons that a quarterback's eyes wouldn't be there. And that's what I think is the challenge with this kid. It's not necessarily, hey, did you get every single guy who's open? Because no quarterback on planet Earth does. But it's, did you get him the ball when he's in your progression, more like that double post with the sail combination? Those are kind of the bigger worries for me than, when a guy makes a route adjustment and you're not there.
What didn't you like about routes against single high?
I hated the combos. Like, listen, we're running like double slant against single high, which, like, you have to go to JV football to realize it's a terrible concept, right? That's a cloud coverage look. When we want double slant, we want slant arrow against it. And we had some mirrored looks, which I also am not a huge fan of. So mirrored looks would be like, the red zone where he scrambles, makes a dive at the end zone, and he's not in. Well, it's a mirrored look, right? They're running double spot with corners. and he just picks the wrong side. So to me, it's like, well, when you have a mirrored look, you're really telling your quarterback, just go with what side you like best. That's a terrible way to develop a quarterback, in my opinion. In my opinion, you give him, hey, here's our 2-shell side, here's our 3-shell side. We're down tight in the red zone. Okay, hey, said hut, Y20, Y20, hut, let's get a look at it. Okay, boom, they rotate to single high. Let's work the single high side. Don't give them a mirrored look where then it's more feel. Like, give that to a vet, right? That's how that's what you see Green Bay does a ton of, right? Mirrored concepts, because they have 12 who sits back there and has played more pro football than Justin Fields has played football his whole life, right? So those are the kind of guys that you give the mirrored concepts to. To me, with Justin, you give him some more of that, hey, 2-shell, 3-shell type pre-snap looks, and I think you're going to see this kid's developmental curve really, kind of J-curve to where all of a sudden it's going to take off.
Dumb it down a level for us. If I this is getting pretty coachy, pretty jargony. It's great, and I'm loving this. But I'm certain that there's at least one Bears fan in the car right now going, wait, help me understand what you mean by 2-shell, 3-shell. Go through exactly what you said about that play, but give us a more basic understanding of what you just said.
Yeah, so the NFL, progressions for quarterbacks are grouped into really 2 categories. Pure progressions, which means we look at our number 1 receiver, then our number 2, then our number 3, no matter the coverage, right? So you look at one guy, then the next, no matter the coverage. Then there's the PSL category, which is pre and post snap look. That's based on coverage shell. So that's what we're talking about. So 2-shell is think, hey, we just got 2 high safeties. You'll hear people call it MOFO, right? And not like when your wife's riled up at you, like middle of the field open,
Middle of field open,
the
MOFO.
2-shell.
Okay.
Right? The 2-shell is, hey, middle of the field open. That's 2 safeties deep. And then you have MOFC, which is a single safety deep. Okay. So that's the ones where it's like, hey, you might have Y dog to one side, which is a deep out and an under. And then to the other side, you might have double vert, just 2 guys taking off. If it's 2-shell, middle of the field open, 2 safeties back, you read the dog side. If they kick in and they run single high, you're just going to read the highway side, which is double vert. So those are the kind of plays that I think you could really expedite his development. My issue when I was saying, hey, I didn't like what they had drawn up, was it would be more like, hey, they would have double dog, meaning, right, hey, double outs with unders on both sides. So now you're really putting the quarterback in a tough spot, because let's say they kick to single high coverage. I don't really have a good look, schematically, unless I'm like, oh, okay, well, hey, I just like this matchup and I'm going to try to go there. And that's where I think it could really develop, really help his development, is if we gave him more, okay, hey, go to this side against this look, and really coach him up on that.
Okay, philosophically, this is great stuff, Tim. Philosophically, if you don't have a great wide receiver, if you don't have a guy where you don't have Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase or even like last year's Allen Robinson, like somebody who is going to run the right route, is going to have the right angle, is going to be in a position where you can put it within a reasonable catch radius, is, in your estimation, is what the Bears are doing, does that exacerbate that problem, or is it neutral, or does it ameliorate that problem based on just not having a go-to guy?
I mean, it makes it way worse, right? It makes it way worse, because if you sit up there and as a quarterback, you go, hey, conceptually, I don't have a really good play on to beat this coverage. Okay, so hypothetically, let's say Justin's going up there and he goes, listen, I've got a, MOFO, middle of the field open concept, and they're in close coverage. So right now I don't have a good look. And let's say they haven't given him a full kill package yet, where you hear those guys yell kill, kill to get to a new play. Let's say we don't have that on this play. So now I'm stuck with this combo. And then not to mention, so now, hey, I don't have the right stuff route-wise, but I got to go to my best matchup, and then I don't have my dude, right? I don't have a dude who I'm comfortable with, like someone who can go get this football for me. It makes it way worse. So to me, that's where he's kind of stuck in the middle of a lot of stuff where it's like, hey, I don't necessarily agree with the route concepts they're running. And then at the same time, he doesn't have a true number 1, in my opinion, to bail him out. So that's where, I think it really makes that problem worse, like you're talking about, where if he doesn't have a guy he can trust or that he's comfortable with yet as that true number 1, it makes those kind of decisions even tougher as a quarterback.
Tim, when you're talking about the 2-shell or the 3-shell decision making that goes into it, where Are you talking about like where this would cut down the processing time of fields? Because if he's dealing with the two slants, it's almost like that takes more time to develop and he's got to scan the whole field versus, all right, I know I'm going to the vert side on these. I just have to make sure I understand where the guys are going to be.
Yeah, it would definitely cut down on the processing because you're not having to make a decision based on leverage and numbers, right? You're making a decision based on coverage shell. So it would even go back to your first guest, like you were talking about, where he was saying, listen, there's guys running open. Well, yeah, heck yeah, there were. But what if I picked the wrong side, right? So what if we have double goes with like a shake in the middle, which is just a post or a seam based on coverage? Let's say we have that play called and I picked the wrong go side. Well, yeah, I've got a guy running a go wide open down the field, but I picked the wrong side because there was no reason for me other than feel, right? So that's where you're going to speed up his processing too, like you're talking about, is if instead of just having flat out double go with a shake, we have, you know, hey, we have a go and a shake on one side, and then the other side you have like a 9-yard where the receiver pushes up 9 yards and sits. Well, good. Now I've got my closed side. I'm going to go ahead and work that 9-yard stop. And then I've got my open side. I'm going to work the post inside out to the go. So that's where it's like, I'm sure there's, you know, I saw on tape too, there's guys running wide open, but, you know, who am I to tell Justin, well, why'd you put your eyes there? They're obviously coaching him, you know, on these, we call them mirrored concepts where you're running the same thing on both sides. They're obviously trying to give him something to where it's like, hey, you know, if you feel it like this, work this side. And he's just working the wrong side. So to me, the easiest way to fix this thing would be to expedite it like you're talking about, where we start matching these concepts more to where it's 2-shell, 3-shell, so he can expedite that decision making.
Let's go back a step to the comparison that you were making regarding Aaron Rodgers. Now, Luke Getsy was Aaron Rodgers' quarterback's coach, and it may just be that he has some presumptions about what works based on the luxury he's had of having Aaron Rodgers do this. So in a situation where it is a mirrored concept, and Rodgers is able to then know who he's got on which side, where his eyes are going to start and where they're going to finish, and how he's going to be able to use eye manipulation and or the sleight of hand of play action, etc., to move people where he wants. How big a gap is it really between the level at which Rodgers could do that and what Fields is being possibly asked to do at the moment?
It's the biggest possible gap you could have currently with Justin Fields and Aaron Rodgers, right? Like we're talking about, like Justin is a really darn good quarterback if you put him in the situation that a second-year, third-year pro needs to be in, right? Like, but if you're going to give him just, hey, here's a mirrored concept, go based on the defense, and then compare it to Aaron Rodgers, mirrored concept, go against the defense. It's the biggest possible gap you could create for yourself as an offensive coordinator / quarterback coach. Like I'll stand by that until the day I die, because the reason those guys become great later in their career is because they, like, listen, the double spot with the corners that we talked about where Justin then scrambles and tries to dive and make a touchdown, it's wide open to the field. If you go back and run the tape and you look at the field spot, it is sitting at the end zone wide open. It's like your Aunt Judy on your turkey bowl, right? You know you can pick on her. You've got the spot concept. You can hit that thing. It's wide open. Like, it's as open as it's going to get, right? The difference is Justin Fields just hasn't played that much football, so he doesn't realize that 6 is hanging out in the box, and we're actually 5-on-3 to the boundary because he's going to go ahead and push to the second, but he's going to push to the side that the back is. Like, he just doesn't realize that yet, and he shouldn't. Like, we're not here to crucify him about that because he hasn't played enough downs to realize that. So to me, that's where it's like the failing really has to be shifted onto the coaches, like you're talking about. And listen, that might be their theory on quarterbacking might be, hey, listen, we want this guy to decipher it, and we're going to live with the growing pains that come with it. And so be it. But I do think there's some winnable games that you're going to end up dropping just because we're not helping expedite, you know, Justin's eye placement in certain situations.
That's what I was going to ask. Is it possible that they agree with you on this? It's possible. Is it plausible, I should say? Is it plausible to think these coaches are like, man, we trust Justin. He's a smart dude, and we're going to throw him in, and we're going to show him all of these things on film, and we're going to and it's going to take some time. But boy, when he gets it, we're not going to make it easy for him now. But when he gets it, it's going to be gangbusters. Is that plausible?
It's definitely plausible, but it's also like, it'd be the same way of me trying to teach my 6-year-old how to do math by not showing his work and just, hey, one day you're going to know 2 + 2 is 4. Like, why not show him, hey, 2 shell, 3 shell, we're going to get here, and this is why we're going to get here. And then in the future, you're going to be able to work it through OTAs and everything. Like, listen, I do think that that's 100% plausible that they're, hey, we're going to rep it, we're going to get looks on film. But, like, listen, this is the NFL. I'd never be willing to throw away a season just to get some guys some looks at something. Like, we can get looks at something during the week. We can get looks at it in OTAs and training camp. I'm there to win. And if 2 shell, 3 shell is going to get us a win quicker, like, that's what I'm doing. And that's kind of what I think the rest of the locker room would be looking at a coach pretty crazy if that was their theory.
When you're working with quarterbacks and they're struggling, how do you get them out of their own head and let them know that you still believe in them and that they can make the adjustment and the improvement?
That's such a great question, and it's a terrible answer I'm going to give you, but it's case by case. I tell you broadly what you're trying to remind them of is who they are, right? Especially when you're talking about NFL quarterbacks. You know, if I was in there coaching Justin Fields, what I'm trying to remind him of is who he is, right? He took over games left and right in college. He's done it his whole life. He can take over games at this level. We just have to get you to have your eyes in the right spot on certain situations, and the rest you're doing a really darn good job with. Like, listen, I was joking about the spot and how open it was. So every quarterback on planet Earth, if they get to the right spot on spot, could have thrown that touchdown. Only Justin Fields and a couple other could have created the scramble where you're almost getting in, right? So that's what you're trying to pour into him is, listen, dude, you can be so special. We are right here. We're right on the cusp with it. I need you to get to this spot and this spot and this spot, you know, on these certain situations. But other than that, man, when he gets in a scramble drill, he's creating some cool stuff. And, like, listen, that game is a lot closer than people felt like. You know, you're a dive away. They run quarterback dive on 4th and inches. If he gets in there, if all of a sudden he takes one less step when he throws the ball when he was, like, 4 yards past the line of scrimmage, if he takes one less stride, right, that's all of a sudden a huge play too. So I think there's a lot of stuff that he's a lot closer on than it maybe feels like after that loss for Bears fans. But I would be just reminding him, hey, man, you're that dude. You're the reason you're in there is your skill set. Let's just get you to the right spot on a couple of these plays, and everything else is going to take care of itself.
Case by case, I get that. I am curious on what you think of what a lot of people, when we had a texter today, brought up about the concept of the car effect, of when you go through a lot of physical struggles early on in your career as a quarterback, how can you rebound and not see ghost and trust that you're seeing guys that are open to be able to rip it and that your protection is going to be there?
Yeah, well, that's a bigger philosophy, in my opinion, of how you build your offense, right? Because I agree with what you're saying, which is, hey, we can go ahead and get pummeled, and then all of a sudden our career trajectory looks more like Sam Darnold, right, than it does like, a rising star in the league. So I get what they're saying, and I think a lot of that's offensive philosophy of, you can make a quarterback more certain of where to go with the football by cleaning up his reads. And I think that can be accomplished through, even more of the first read type, like we talked about with those pure progressions where it's, hey, no matter what, number 1 is this basic, then I'm going to get number 2 is this curl, and then number 3 is my check wide to my back. You can really make a guy aggressive by putting him in that style of offense, because he's going to sit there and go like, listen, I'm going to get graded negatively if I pass up progression 1 and it's open to get to 2. So if 1's there, I'm freaking ripping this thing, right? So that's how you can really make these guys more aggressive, like you're saying, of making sure he's driving the football to open guys. So that would be, an offensive tweak of way to do it. And the rest is, pouring into him of, hey, you're our guy. We trust everything you're doing. Here's the 3 things I need you to clean up, and let's run at this thing.
I am looking at the text line that's blowing up with, who is this guy? Who is this guy? Who is this guy? This is Tim Jenkins, the founder, CEO, and quarterbacks coach at Jenkins Elite. He has been in camp with the St. Louis Rams, the Calgary Stampeders, et cetera, and has been coaching a slew of collegiate quarterbacks. And we started the show by talking about Jalen Hurts' performance last night. And I don't know how much of that film you saw, how much of the game you saw, but how would you compare and contrast Fields and Hurts, the systems that they're in, and what you've seen?
I think Jalen Hurts is a perfect example of a kid who is now comfortable in a system and knows exactly where his eyes should be on certain looks. And we're not getting the mirrored concepts go ahead and feel it out. And you're seeing a ton of pure progression. Now they're working the pure progression, right? Which what we were talking about, where it's no matter, receiver number 1, number 2, number 3, no matter what the coverage is. And they're working it off of run and play action, right? Because he's so deadly in the run game, they're getting a ton of single high. Like, listen, the Bears could really flip on the Eagles tape and steal a bunch of their run and play action concepts.
But can they do it without Lane Johnson and Jason Kelce?
Yeah, I mean, it's a fair point. I would tell you that when you run and play action, it's actually better for your quarterback, because you're either going to get an immediate run through, which Justin Fields can make miss, or protection is going to be great because they're going to be in that half run game, half pass rush, right? So to me, I'm always a big fan of doing run and play action with these guys, because, like, listen, if we get that free runner, I'm trusting Justin to get out of there. The same way you have to do it with every quarterback. The only difference is when you see Tom Brady and the Bucs do it, if there's a free runner, he falls over, they play 2nd and 18, right? So that's where I think you can trust him to get out of the pocket. But you also can manufacture better offensive linemen by being in run and play action, because you can either knock off their games, right? When they play those D-line games where they're doing all the twists and stunts, you knock all those off when all of a sudden you show a run look, right? So to me, I think that's actually a way to help expedite this offensive line. And I do think, like, listen, I know the O-line isn't great in Chicago, but, like, let's talk about the first drive for a second. They were gashing them in the run game. And it's hard to do that if you guys truly suck up front, right? So to me, I think there's a way to make them successful. We just got to figure out how to do it. And to me, you can mix in those run and play actions, and you can move the launch point if you want. But I'm not sure you really have to that much with Fields, because I think he'll do it naturally if all of a sudden we start losing guys clean up front.
Last week going into the game, Fields was talking about looking at Aaron Rodgers' tape. And I'm sure he's probably trying to draw inspiration from all sorts of different quarterbacks around the NFL. What are the positives of doing stuff like that, and what are the dangers of a young quarterback looking at Hall of Fame quarterbacks and trying to tailor his game towards those quarterbacks?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on what he's watching for, right? If he's watching from a technique perspective, I'd tell you Rodgers isn't the guy you want to watch, right? Because he just does stuff that I would never coach our guys to do, because it doesn't seem biomechanically sound. But listen, it's Aaron Rodgers, so who cares, right? If you're that good, you go ahead and do whatever you want. So if he's watching from that perspective, I wouldn't be a fan of it. I guarantee he's watching it from, hey, how does he manipulate his eyes? What is he doing on these situations? Those are good things to pick up from other quarterbacks. But it's always such a double-edged sword, because it's got to be cut from the same system. You've got to be coaching things the same way. You've got to understand their personnel and who he's comfortable with. Like, listen, the Green Bay tape through 2 weeks looks drastically different than it did last year. Why? They lost Devontae Adams, right? So Aaron Rodgers now in third and 6 situation is going through his real progression. Whereas last year, a lot of it was, hey, get up there, green 18 set, try to get him to jump off sides. If they don't, hey, I'm going to work this backside one-on-one with Devontae. So to me, I think there's a lot of things you can learn from that tape, but I do think it's a double-edged sword, especially if you're not running the same exact system and you don't have the same personnel.